I'm a 33-year-old woman who has gone through a lot lately. My dad passed away recently. My immigrant mother's cardiac condition was identified. My toddler is 3 years old, and I am his only parent. When I was pregnant, my husband looked to his colleague for comfort. Not only am I coping with all this junk mentally, but I'm also struggling financially. Even though my ex-husband pays child support, it only goes towards his food and play school expenses. Toddlers require many more than this, as you are aware. They constantly ask for items, go on trips, and have insatiable cravings for candy and ice cream. Bombs are needed for it. In the middle of all of this, I'm dealing with the emotional fallout from losing my dad, who was my rock, a few months ago, and now learning that my mum has heart illness. There isn't anyone else I can confide in for emotional support. Please excuse me while I go on and on. A friend recommended this spot for venting. I was still managing all of this chaos in some way, but my sister makes a lot of noise in my life since she doesn't think my problems are serious enough. My 38-year-old older sister, Karen, has spent the last 15 years apart from the family dynamics. Since moving out of the family to attend college, she hasn't had much communication with any of us. She married someone in downtown after getting a job there. She didn't even tell her parents about her engagement. I was only invited as a guest to the wedding, along with my parents. She hardly spoke to us at the wedding either. She was occupied conversing with her in-laws and pals. When she did talk to us, it was all about how elegant and wealthy her in-laws were. And that's it. She has been married for 10 years, or so, and she hasn't really checked in with us. She never came to our house with her spouse. And we were all really delighted for her when she became pregnant with her first daughter. She stated she was busy, but we still wanted to see her. She notified us 10 days after her daughter's birth so we could attend her baptism as a formality. Despite their displeasure, my parents went to the ceremony. She is, after all, their first grandchild. She said that I was egocentric ever since I didn't go, and I haven't gone since. It was nothing like ego. She never showed me love or treated me with respect as a sibling. To her, I was just another stranger. She never treated us like family because she was always so preoccupied with her own life. After her marriage, we were just a place for her to let her hair down. She would always complain about her new car, new house, and other such things when she contacted her mother. In the past, it was her job. Throughout her first few years of marriage, she seemed to be constantly occupied at work. Mum repeatedly asked her and her spouse, but each time she excused them by saying they were busy, even though their social media presence suggested otherwise. Nearly every weekend, their party photos were visible. I told her it was only a 2-hour drive, and she was like, "Well, we party at our house or at places close to our house. You guys live in the countryside." Yes, we stopped inviting her again after she responded, "Yeah, but 2 hours is long for us busy people." For the benefit of their grandchildren, my parents attempted to mend the relationship after her children. She was invited to come see her kids, but she never showed up. "My children would get sick in the 2-hour drive, it's dusty there." And similar statements were frequently made. We didn't disturb her, we left her alone. She didn't spend much time with her father when he was sick. Over the past few years, Mum has repeatedly begged her to see Dad, but she always had an explanation ready. Dad always wanted to share one family supper with the rest of us, even in his final days. Although she had promised to go, she abruptly withdrew. Now that Dad has passed away and she is aware that he left us a sizable legacy, she is behind us in the division of property. Alright, so prior to that, the physician said that Dad's time was almost up when he was admitted to the hospital for the final time. I called my sister and all of my close relatives, uncles and aunts. While most of the family was able to attend and say goodbye to Dad, his own daughter arrived the day after Dad passed away. The disappointment my father must have felt in his final moments was unfathomable. She pulled up the act when she realized Dad was gone, and we were surrounded by friends and family. Although she appeared to be grieving and diaphragming over the loss, we all realized that she was acting falsely. She was Dad's daughter, So even though I wanted to ignore her and kick her out of the house, there was nothing I could do. She saw the lawyer approaching just as she was ready to leave the funeral. That was such a horrible insult, but she smirked and added, "Oh, did Dad have anything substantial to make a will for?" Dad made a respectable living, so he wasn't wealthy, but he gave everything he could. In addition, our parents provided us with a good upbringing and a happy house. But money has always been my sister's issue. I remember watching her complain about money issues all growing up. She used to constantly draw comparisons between our way of life and the wealthy kids. She was constantly envious of her wealthy acquaintances. She was determined to attend a city college after finishing school and move out of the area. She was prepared to flee if our parents didn't agree, despite their best efforts to explain the financial situation to her. In order to cover her living expenses and tuition, Dad was forced to mortgage his farm. He had to make numerous concessions and wait many years to pay off his obligations. I'm not sharing these particulars to paint her in a negative light. She embodies all I've said and more. This post would become a book if I were to go on and on about how self-centered she is. After seating us, the attorney went over the will. The house belongs to Mom, or whoever she decides to give it to at her discretion. Dad saved up about $100,000, which Karen received, and I was given the land and windmill. This startled Karen. The lawyer shot her an odd look for her ignorance when she said, "Wasn't that farmland sold off? And when did Dad get into the windmill thing?" Mom motioned for her to talk about these issues after the will reading, but she needed the information now. Mom asked the attorney to pardon us. Karen said there was foul play and that Dad had divided the property unfairly. She became irate, complaining that she was never informed about her father's business involvement. I wanted to give it back to her the way she was screaming at Mom, but that would have involved her coming right after me. It was obvious that she didn't like that Dad's large estate was going to me. It's not that I was afraid of her, but on the day of my dad's funeral, I really didn't want to face her. Mum was not allowing her to talk, even when she tried to explain the field and the windmill thing to her. Mum lost her temper and yelled at her, telling her that since she had stopped communicating with us, she could not hold us responsible for not updating her on our lives. She insisted that Mum and Dad were biased against me despite Mom's best efforts to explain. She even said that since I was single and working as a low-wage teacher at a community school, I was stealing money from my parents. Her hurtful remarks made me feel so ill and disgusted that I was unable to control myself. I informed her that she was the most self-centered person present. It took Dad years to recover from the debt she had thrown him into. She never checked on him in return, and she didn't even pay him a visit in his final days. When it came to selling the farmland, she was partly correct. Dad had taken out a mortgage on that land to cover her college expenses, but he struggled for years to make the loan payments. Dad urged her to help with the loan EMI when she started making a good living, but she refused, saying that it was his responsibility as a father. Dad was on the point of selling the farmland to pay off the loan after missing a few EMIs, and things were so bad. Karen turned down Mom's repeated requests for assistance, claiming she was too poor to make a contribution and that we should sell off the land. What good has it given until now? But just in time, Dad received assistance from his buddy, who helped rescue the farms. Dad eventually paid his friend back. You see, I was impacted by this situation as well. I had begun working at an extremely young age. During my breaks from school, I took up odd jobs and worked hourly at farms and orchards. I had enough money saved up by the time I completed my education to cover my college expenses. However, as the crisis hit, I had to use my funds to pay for living expenses. Of course, I can't go hungry, let my folks go hungry, and then use that money to pay for education. I had to stop for a few years until things got back on track financially. That's when I started working at a daycare, which I did for the duration of my undergraduate career. After graduation, I started working at a community school. I believe that the government initiated a windmill project for the farmers in our community 5 or 6 years ago. The government paid us rent for the use of our land and allowed us to sell the electricity produced by the windmill that they assisted us in installing. We were required to run it and handle the upkeep in return. This plan also helped Dad regain his acreage, which helped him improve his financial situation. Karen was upset by the will because she was aware of the money made from the farm and windmills, and she couldn't stand to see that Dad had left me the meatier ones in his will. After hurriedly leaving the house, she threatened to sue Mum and me for allegedly forging Dad's will. She has been threatening to initiate a forgery case against all of us, including the lawyer, ever since. Although we are aware that her claims are untrue, we are worried that if she files a lawsuit, the job will stop and we will lose our source of income while the case is pending. Mum depends on the money the farm generates, even though I work at the school. In addition, we lack the funds necessary to pursue legal action. Mum has been under a lot of stress over this, and during her most recent checkup, a cardiac condition was discovered. I apologize for the long page, but I just had to get it out. You don't have to feel bad about babbling. This is a safe place. I'm very sorry you had to deal with someone who was so egotistical when her father was dying. It's repulsive to believe that she is entitled to anything given that she never existed in the first place, and was too busy to bid her own father farewell. First update. I sincerely appreciate all of your love and support following my article. To be honest, I didn't think it would become so hot. I came here only to rant because I had no one else with whom to discuss my suffering in such detail. After Dad's death 2 months ago, we had been living in constant terror of being wrongly accused by Karen. Dad's attorney recommended that we begin the name transfer process in the interim. We followed through on his recommendation. My mother called me in an emergency one evening. She shook when she spoke. She asked me to return home right now. I inquired about her well-being. Sure, she replied, but she insisted that I come right now. To be honest, I got really afraid. She was breathing heavily, so I assumed it was related to her health. My son and I couldn't be apart at night. While he was still asleep, I tucked him into the back of the car and drove away. When I got to Mom's house, the neighborhood was buzzing with police sirens, the house was surrounded by barricades, and neighbors were milling about. I cried as I hurried inside. I feared my mum had passed away, but when I discovered her on the front porch, a police officer had calmed her down. I gave her a strong hug. I told the police that my mother had heart issues and that she needed time to collect herself before making the statement they requested. The neighbors comment, after which I learned the whole tale. That is to say, while Mum was sleeping, my sister broke into the house from the garden. Mum had been watching TV when she slept off on the couch. The sound of footsteps entering a chamber with a flickering torchlight startled her. She believed that someone had broken into the house. She remained motionless and seemed to be asleep. Mum quickly rushed outside the house and informed the neighbor, who then called the police, after she was certain that the burglar was inside the room. In order to trap the intruder inside the house, the NE additionally secured the house from the outside. My sister was attempting to flee through the back door when the police arrived and unlocked the door. She pretended to be strolling across the garden when she noticed the police officers. "It's my mom's house and I was just walking on the lawn," she said, leaving Mum unsure of whether to report Karen. Karen was being held prisoner in the bedroom. I went to talk to her with Mum. Although she claimed to be there to see Mum, the state of the closet gave away that she was looking for something, as it was completely disorganized. Mum had the option to report it, but I wanted her to. Mum refused to report, she informed the police. Karen's data were still taken, and she was forewarned not to break into the residence again. Her sneaking was corroborated by neighbors, which made them suspicious of her. We questioned her once more after the police had left. However, she was unable to locate the documents in the closet. She was upset, saying, "You guys have forged Dad's will. How could you get everything and I just get peanuts of $100,000? We didn't tell our lawyer where the will was, so thank God I was with her for the paperwork." When she inquired about it, Mum told her it was none of her concern. I wanted to smack her head, but Mum yelled at her for her language, reminding her that it was she who had cut all of us off from her life, and now she had to suffer. She looked at me and said, "Then it must be at this witch's house." She's the one who manipulated you both emotionally and took my share of the property. Mom opened up about everything that was on her mind for an hour. Karen attempted to come across as defensive, but Mom restrained her. She demanded that Mom give the house to her as fair play when she ran out of things to say. She was firm in her demands and demanded a commitment from Mom that she would give her the house because Dad had already given me enough, even though Mom was asking her to go. When my kid got up and went home, I challenged Karen to never even consider breaking into my house because I would not hesitate to denounce her and have her imprisoned. Despite her insulting me with all kinds of names, I refused to back down and walked away. Even when I left the house, she followed me and swore loudly at me. When a neighbor yelled at her from their window, threatening to call the police, she stopped. I gave Mom a ring in the morning to see how she was doing. Mom claimed that Karen attempted to control Mom's emotions after I departed. She was crying and whining, telling me how my parents always loved me and preferred me over her, and that's why she moved to the city from the town. She insisted that Mom make good on her commitment to give her the house. Mom claimed she did nothing wrong, but in order to prevent any future disputes, she is considering making a will right now. I didn't ask her, and she didn't tell me who she had decided to give the house to. I was content with whatever my father had left for me. I wonder why, given her harsh threats, Karen has not filed a lawsuit against us. Not sure, though. I suppose she doesn't have the necessary document to continue. I followed up with a lawyer in the interim, and he promised to transfer the property into my name by the following month. If it's feasible, I'll provide an update after that. I appreciate your patience. Thank you for all the love. Edit to add, many of you asked why the will was kept in the closet rather than a bank safe. Our neighborhood is tight-knit and safe, and we reside in the country. We never experienced serious crimes or even break-ins by thieves, unlike those living in cities, thus we never needed a bank locker. I understand that this may seem unusual to those in the city, but in rural cultures, this is the standard. She doesn't have a pot to urinate in, so she's not suing you for that. She is obviously at fault, and the will is painfully genuine. She will lose in court as she has to appear with you and your mother. It's obvious as day. She should feel ashamed for harming your mother in such a vulnerable way. Second update. I want to thank everyone who has been keeping an eye on me. I respond to all messages and chats, but I was simply too busy to provide a thorough update. Life has improved overall, but I still had a lot to settle, and a lot of it required time. Permit me to briefly summarize the events without delving into specifics. It took an additional 4 to 5 weeks after my last post for the farm and windmill to officially come into my name. Dad had a working agreement with the windmill and all the laborers on his property. It all needed to be updated. I spent some time finding out how these things operate. My mum supported me during that time. She knew all about the time she helped Dad. I asked Mum to run the business and retain the profits for herself for as long as she wished. In order to prevent Karen from causing issues in the future, we came to an agreement on it. In the middle of all of this, Mum received a letter from Karen's husband accusing her of stealing some cash and some jewelry that belonged to her family. When Karen's mother called him, she learned that her husband had lost a lot of money to gambling. She became indebted and fled with cash and their family jewelry when her husband refused to give her any more money. When Mum asked him about her work, he replied that she had quit long ago after having her first child. Given that she never paid us a visit and always claimed to be preoccupied at work, we can only speculate where she was spending her time. He promised to provide the divorce documents as quickly as possible. Mum informed him that Karen wasn't here at our house, so there was no use sending it to us. He claimed he had to send the paperwork to her parents' home because he didn't know where she was. He mentioned that, but I'm not sure if that's legal in a situation like this where the wife has run away. Mum told him about the commotion she'd caused regarding Dad's will. Karen received $100,000 in the will, although her husband was unaware of this. He stated Karen had told him that Dad had given me everything and had demanded a loan so she could file a lawsuit against us for forgery. However, her spouse withheld the payment. He speculated that Karen might have needed to spend the $100,000 to settle significant debts she had accrued from her gaming. She saved her butt from the gambling loss by using Dad's hard-earned savings. Isn't that disgusting? After that, Karen didn't come see us. When Mom tried to reach her, her phone was either out of network or shut off. However, she called her mother a few days ago and asked for money in an emergency. When her mother inquired as to why, she explained that her daughter had been in an accident, her husband was out of town, and she desperately needed money. Everything about it was false. Mom informed her that we are well aware of the situation and that her husband had written a formal notice claiming that she had fled with his money and belongings. She never returned the call after hanging up. I believe she has realized that she can no longer pretend to be proud in front of us because her evil deeds have come to light. You are aware that my ex-husband, who left me for his colleague, has been making approaches in the midst of all of this. We used to occasionally discuss our son's situation, but these days I see that he feels comfortable talking to me about anything. It gets me thinking, money can buy far more than you may imagine. In any case, I appreciate all of the love and support I've received from this community, and may discuss these dynamics in a later thread. You are the best group of people. Whoa, that makes perfect sense. Like a leech, she just sucks everything dry. Her tail is now between her legs as she flees. I hope it's the last time you hear from her. How do you interpret all of this? Have you ever had to handle a woe-related family conflict? Tell us in the comments section below. And I'm grateful.